What's up guys, welcome back. Today we're looking at 5 reworked gods from Smite's history, looking at their old abilities, their playstyles and how they were used. There have been plenty of gods in Smite who've had their abilities and their looks completely reworked to be changed drastically, and it's pretty interesting to take a look back at how they were played before, so let's get into it.
Arachne.
First up we've got Arachne. Arachne's new abilities are vastly different from her old ones, turning her into a more basic attack focused assassin. Her old passive was similar to Daji's current passive, where it's just a kind of damage over time effect on each auto attack, but she starts to get pretty cool once we get into her actual abilities. Her first ability summoned spider eggs that work similar to how her web works now, where anyone who moves close to the egg sacs that you place down kind of triggers them and spiders hatch from the pods to chase enemies. You could have up to 5 egg pods at a time, which when you combine this with her ultimate, which we'll talk about later, is fucking hilarious. It made her jungle clear actually pretty damn quick, because it's similar to how she can clear jungle quite quick now. You just put down I think the maximum was 2 or 3 maybe at level 1, but you just put down a fuck ton of egg pods and just cleared a camp really quickly with all the broodlings that it spawned. But yeah, this ability was super fun to use, especially in combination with her ultimate. Her second ability was kind of weird, mainly the animation was kind of weird. You jumped on an enemy's head and you pretty much just gave them the suck. You just sucked on the head for a little while and you healed yourself, did damage to them. But just the animation really got me with this. You just kind of hop on their head and you give them the suck, and it looks kind of weird. Not a special ability or anything. I find the animation for it freaking hilarious. Her old third ability was also kind of boring. It was just basically you fired a web and it just created a AoE slow field. Pretty sizable, but it was just a slow, it didn't do anything else. But it was good for chasing people down if you can get that big slow, because it was up to 50% slow at max rank. So if you catch someone in a jungle corridor with that, they get pretty fucked while they're trying to walk across that because they're slowed so much. Now onto her ultimate. This was the really fun part of the kit for me, and it was what made me play her quite a bit back in the day. It was like a line projectile hits an enemy god and pulls them towards Arachne and stuns them for 1.5 seconds. It had quite low damage, it was only 300 at max rank with 50% physical scaling, but it was just so much fun just pulling someone out of their lane or something, or into your own tower and just fucking destroying them by crawling on their head with her too, so they can't jump away because they're silenced. And the best thing about this ability was the fact that it was on a 30-second cooldown, so you could just constantly be pulling people through walls, especially if you built full cooldown reduction. I think it goes down to 18 seconds, if my maths is right there, which is fucking hilarious. Just pulling people through walls all the time is great. It's basically a version of Sylvanas' pull, but it was slightly stronger, because it actually did damage and stunned at the end as well, but it was an ultimate, so that's kind of fair enough. Overall, she was just a super fun god to play. She wasn't the most meta or viable pick at any point, really. She was kind of just bad, and that's probably part of the reason why she got reworked. But it was just hilarious to, steal people through jungle walls and climb on their head, giving them the suck. And overall, she was just incredibly fun to play. More fun than the current Arachne, in my opinion.
Vulcan!
Other interesting god rework was Vulcan. He was originally a Guardian on release, and his 1 and his 2 were both the same as they are now, Backfire and Inferno Cannon, but he had a different passive, a different 3, and a different ultimate. He was a lot more focused around his structures and deployables, aka his turrets. His 3 was a deployable turret like his 2, but instead of being in a cone and just shooting projectiles, it just did pulsing AoE damage to all targets in a circular AoE, and also slowed enemies. And his passive gave 20% of Vulcan's health and protections to his turrets, making them tankier. His ultimate was a steroid that gave him movement speed and protections, while increasing the attack speed of his turrets and giving them health regen. And it also allowed his 2, the Inferno Cannon, to fire in a circle around it instead of just a cone in front of it. It was kind of bad with his original kit and quite hard to balance, since the turrets were so easy to destroy that you just killed his turrets and then that's all of his damage and CC gone, and he's just worthless at that point. But overall it seems like a pretty fun kit, just being so focused around deployables and things. It could be cool to see something similar return to Smite at some point, but ideally easier to balance and not quite as shit.
Kali.
Another interesting god that got reworked was Kali. She had a full kit rework like Arachne, where every ability was different, including her passive. And she also had a different visual design. Her old passive, basically, it was similar to Freya's. It just gave her 5% base lifesteal for free, without having to do anything, and upped that to 20% lifesteal and below 25% health. Her first ability was a steroid, which granted 55 physical power and 35% movement speed, and made her basics and abilities apply a bleed that did up to 60 damage over 2 seconds. The ability had a 6-second duration and it was on a pretty low cooldown, I think 11 seconds at max rank. Her second ability was pretty simple, it was just an AoE cone damage in front of Callie. Pretty big, probably about like Sobek 3 kind of size. And it hit for up to 335 damage with 100% scaling. It did a lot of damage but it didn't really do anything else. Her third ability was a circular AoE damage ability that did pretty low amounts of damage, but it had like a massive heal attached to it. You could heal for up to 3 targets and it was 130 plus 30% of your physical power per target hit. So you could end up healing for like close to 500 health per time you cast this, and it was on like a 12-second cooldown, which is pretty sweet. Her ultimate, she basically started spinning around and did damage every 0.5 seconds in a pretty big AoE. It could deal up to 1200 base damage with 200% physical scaling. Even though it's one of those abilities where you're pretty unlikely to hit every tick of the ability, it still hit pretty hard. Plus, the cooldown scaled down from 80 seconds to 60 seconds, so late game, if you built a bit of CDR, which you would on Callie back then, you could have a pretty low cooldown on that ultimate. Combining the 1 and the ultimate though was pretty hard to escape because you had the extra movement speed plus bleed damage plus your ult damage, and it did a good amount. The only thing that sucks was that this ability just did raw damage and nothing else. It didn't even have like a slow attached to it or anything, it was just pure damage. Like I said, she also had a visual rework, and I'm pretty sure that's because the Hindus got pissed off at it or something. Like, there was a whole dispute between Hi-Rez and the Hindu community about like pornifying Callie or something. It was pretty funny, you should check it out if you haven't seen that. But yeah, that was all Callie. She seemed pretty fun, in my opinion, like having her be kind of ability based, whereas she's all attack based now, but I'm pretty sure I prefer her current kit, even though her old one does look pretty cool.
Guan Yu.
And up next we got the complete cancer that was original Guan Yu. I've covered this god before on like my most OP god releases ever video, because he was absolutely broken on his release, and this is the kit that he had when he was broken. He used to be a guardian and therefore dealt magical damage, but was quickly reworked into a warrior and had his damage drastically reduced, along with the new ultimate and the new passive. His old passive was pretty simple, especially compared to his passive he has now. It just gave him 15 protections of both types when near an enemy or a friendly structure. His ultimate, however, was a lot more complex and was roughly equivalent to Amaterasu's current ult in the game, where it hits 3 times with a delay between each hit. It did up to 790 base damage with 90% scaling, and slowed on the first hit, silenced on the second hit, and then stunned on the third hit. Also back then, his third ability, Talu Assault, was absolutely broken as shit. Could do up to 350 base damage with 150% magical scaling on a 14-second cooldown. Plus it had protection shred and had its cooldown reduced by the built-in CDR from his 1 and his 2. This was definitely a welcome rework, because he was like so OP that it was basically just whoever got the Guan Yu back then won the game, and I'm glad he was changed.
Nua.
And the final one for today is Nua. Just like Guan Yu, she had a partial kit rework where some of her abilities stayed similar or the same and some were changed. She used to be kind of a hybrid mage with a focus on basic attacks as well as abilities, sort of similar to Sol in a way, where she can do good damage with her abilities but also good damage with her auto attacks. Her passive, she had 5 crystals, 1 which was always active, and then 4 that activate when she casts her abilities. And when all 5 activate, so aka when she's cast all 4 of her abilities recently, she transforms into a big snake and refreshes all the buffs from the crystals for a further 10 seconds. Her one was pretty similar to her fog ability that she has now, but instead of just going off in a direction where you cast it, it followed her around and gave her movement speed when she cast it rather than giving movement speed while you're in the fog. Her 2 was also pretty similar to her current Clay Soldier's ability, but summoned up to 5 soldiers, and the AI was a bit different. It made them kind of derpy and they just kind of ran around everywhere like attacking shit, instead of like now where she can sort of direct them in a direction and pick a target. And Nua also gained physical protections when she cast the ability. Her 3 was completely different to how her 3 is now. It basically summoned a small AoE kind of blast of fire, about the same size as Kronos' 1, and it did more damage the closer you placed it to you. It did pretty damn good damage and applied a dot to the targets afterwards as well, and activated the fire crystal from her passive that gives you AoE auto attacks, and the AoE damage will proc item effects like Polynomicon and old Telkine's Ring. Actually, it'll probably proc new Telkine's Ring as well, but I'm on about old Telkine's Ring for Nua because it was really good on her. She could proc like the damage from Telkine's Ring in like a massive AoE, which was really strong. This ability was also pretty unique in the fact that it could hit towers. So you combine that with her clay soldiers and her ultimate, which we'll talk about in a second, and she ended up being a really solid sort of push god. Now onto her ultimate. This ability was basically Ganesha's current ultimate, but it was a little bit different. The slow was a bit more potent and it did more damage, and also activated the metal crystal, which gave her basics double damage for 10 seconds when cast. But the best thing about this ability by far was the shake and bait combo that you could do. Like, you grab yourself a Nuwa, you grab yourself a Fenrir, you both hit level 5 and you just kill someone basically. Because you put Nuwa's ultimate down, you bite someone with Fenrir, and then you quickly just like mash either W and S or A and D and just move them really quickly between the walls of Nuwa's ultimate, and it basically just insta-killed someone back then, which was fucking hilarious. Like, you could pick up a 5000 HP Ymir and kill him in about a second with a shake and bait combo, which was fucking brilliant.
Never mind, mid's here.
Alright, Seb, you ready to do this?
Oh my
Nuwa was a lot more unique back then in that, like, she had good auto attack damage and good ability damage, and she could just like drop her entire kit and then swing with the double damage auto attacks in an AoE and just bring towers down really quickly, or like just melt people. Personally, I preferred her old kit, but she's still okay now. She's a bit more of a generic mage, and her ultimate's really boring compared to how it used to be. But I can somewhat see why they changed her. So that's 5 gods that got reworked from Smite's history. If you have any ideas for future top 5s, leave a comment. Also, if you're enjoying the content, hit subscribe and maybe the bell. I'm getting really close to 1,000 subscribers, so any more subs will be greatly appreciated. But that's about it. Peace out, nerds.